Good morning. Welcome to the colloquium speech of Electrical Engineering Department. Today I'd like to introduce one of my good friends and also my good mentor during my career, Professor Yu-Hen from University of Wisconsin, Madison. Yu-Hen got his PhD from University of Southern California. And after that, he joined SMU for a while, and finally he landed on University of Wisconsin, where currently he's a professor and associate chairman, the vice chairman of the department. Yu-Hen has been very active in research and also professional services. He's currently the IEEE fellow, has been serving on many different kinds of professional duties for IEEE. I guess that's kind of the very brief introduction of Yu-Hen's accomplishment. So let's give him a big hand before his talk. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me? Yes. Okay. Today I'm very happy to be at this, what we call the other UW. As you can see, we share this very nice letter W, and you know, at Wisconsin we call this UW West. I know that over here you probably call us UW East or UW Midwest. One thing we share is that both has a very nice campus, and both has a campus adjacent to a piece of nice water. And so come over here, I feel very comfortable, and I enjoy the campus very much. And of course, you know, one thing that our campus still have to adjust is that we do not have such nice building. You know, the atrium is a very, very comfort place and enjoyed very much. Today, I would like to introduce some of the research works occurred in our side of a campus. And of course, you know, this has a lot of overlap with colleagues like Professor Huang has been working for many years here. We have some specific applications in mind. So the objective is to provide you with is a brief overview and some of the issues that some of them are still open issues, which I want to share with you. And perhaps, you know, if you're interested, we can discuss after. And this research work is a collaboration with many colleagues. My affiliation is basically the electrical and the computer engineering and the computer science. My colleague, Professor Radwin, is with the industrial and the system engineering and the biomedical engineering. So somehow that we have a little bit mixed up there, and we have several graduate students who participate in this work. So essentially, my presentation will consist of 3 parts. The first is a brief review of a human activity monitoring, what's the problem, where the issue is. And then I introduce some specific applications for our research. One is a hand activity assessment, and the other is driver state assessment. We'll see what we're talking about. Human activity monitoring has become more prevalent and has been come almost everywhere. Obviously, there's a lot of applications there. One of the obvious one is the security and the public safety. That all the gas station, of course, has this video, and the public spaces, you know, department store, wherever you raise your head, you see one of those dark semi-sphere type of camera hidden inside there, and many of the elevators, you know, especially in hotel and other public places, you probably want to raise your head and smile to the camera. And some places even say they smile because you're facing a camera. So camera is ubiquitous and everywhere. Obviously, everyone here probably have a smartphone. When you pick it out, that's a camera. So there's a lot of potential applications. that, for example, that over here, that you could, on the right-hand side, you can see that they are this, I think that's a airport security area. Then on the lower right side, you can see that this is there's a crowd in open space, such as, for example, train station. And obviously, that you also have other applications, such as the caring and the nursing. On the top, you see the icons of someone falling. The senior citizen falling is one of the major issues that people like to address. And then of course, you have a baby cam. These days, you also have in the kindergarten cam and other type of camera for various different monitoring. And also from the other areas, for example, dance. Have you ever thought about that, how do we record dance movement? For the music, we know we have music score, but dance, they also have their own special ways of recording the particular choreographers' ideas how a dance should be recorded, before they invent the videos that somehow they have to keep track of it. And of course, sports that the not just baseball, the golf and many other sports, the people in the, let me see, the field kinesiology, they try to study how did you swing the bat and do other actions such that you will avoid injury and can get a better performance. And so there's, and of course, that sign languages is one of the, fall into this monitoring. So in terms of, and of course, then you have entertainment that people do all kinds of virtual boxing and other things. So the human activity monitoring, if you look into the technicals, the application side, there's a lot of potentials. And the issue is that how much can we do and how we're going to do it. And these are some other applications, that, for example, upper right, we have seen that in the industry that you want to monitor the worker conditions so they do not injure themselves. On the lower left side, that you want to monitor the kids for either the study or for the monitoring and the caring. And there's a lot of a nice picture. You see that how did you track multiple people in a very crowded area and also try to follow their trajectories. So essentially what these are part of the more general thing of video understanding. And in other words, given you're watching a video and you try to figure out what's going on there. As a kid, at least when I was in kindergarten, we have an activity in the kindergarten that the teacher plays a picture, and then each of us will go there, try to tell a story by looking at a picture. Oh, there's a house, there's a river in front of the house, there is a duck, swimming in the river, and there's a sun, and so we point to that, trying to describe the picture. Video understanding has something of the similar nature, that given the video, we try to make sense of it. And so during this process, that there's a lot of people trying to understand what, describe what is the process of video understanding. And if we observe how we do this kind of understanding when we were kids, you can see that we are actually trying to divide this kind of task into different levels. Initially, we like to find objects. There's things there. Oh, here's the sun. Here is a house. There's a duck. So we look at things and we try to identify what are they. And then we want to know where they are. The sun is on the sky. The river is flowing on the ground. So that's their particular spatial relation or interrelations between different objects. And the orientation that the sun is shining from above to so this kind of pose, spatial relation are the second level things we try to discover. And then we try to follow if this video, if it's a picture, we don't have the tracking to worry about. But if it's a video, then we will tend to follow that things going on from one side to the other. For example, that if you watch the golf tournament broadcast, then when there's a swing, there's a ball, then the camera try to follow the ball, and you want to know where the ball ends up with. So the tracking of the motion trajectory is next level. And after that, then you want to make sense what actually all these sequence of motions are doing, or emotions, what are they doing. So finally, you want to know that activity level, what is the understanding. That's the real understanding. But this understanding is very difficult because it's a context dependent. The same actions at a different context could imply different things, as we see that. And therefore, this kind of understanding, a lot of time, even among the human beings, will be very difficult. One of the example, I don't know if you have that example, when I walk on this walkway, on campus, I found that someone is facing and walking toward me, so I yield to the right. And that person looked at me, and somehow he also moved to the right. So we are on the collision course. So I moved to the left, and I found that person find on the right and react and move to this side. So we are actually doing this several times, and we basically apologize several times. We stop, and then we find one way and go in there. So this is something I'm a human being. I try to understand what his intention is. But we could misunderstand each other. And if you ask your algorithm to do something like this, it could be very interesting, right? So therefore, understanding itself is not, it has to be in the special situation, at a special time. Under these contexts, understanding sometimes is more likely. And if you just simply have the whole video and try to figure out what's going on, it may not be as easy. Okay, just try to warn you. So the first thing we do usually is called object detection. This includes, for example, the face detection. You detect the hand. You sometimes detect the head and shoulder. Or sometimes you want to try to segment, using motion, try to figure out what are the region of interest and the things which you are interested in. The object detection has to be directed with this particular goals, because how do we know which object we should pay attention to? Sometimes this in the monitoring of surveillance situation, that things that moves may be of interest. If things are not moving, you're watching still frame forever, then of course maybe that's not really doesn't really matter, and the things moved will attract a lot of attention. So these relates to a lot of fields that people have studied, and there's a lot of research going on. Try to figure out what's happening there. The object detection, or sometimes they have different names. Sometimes called the foreground, background of separation. Sometimes it's called segmentation. But segmentation is a very general term because you could segment lots of objects. You still have to decide which of the object you interest most. And sometimes they're using different ways of segmenting things. So this is an interesting area. A lot of times that there is a human-computer interface here that the user would have to specify explicitly, I'm interested in this, because otherwise that algorithm does not know how should spend the resources to pay attention to certain part. And obviously, in some videos that for example, especially the manually shot videos, that the object could be in the center, could be that with the focused, and therefore can be inferred as interesting subject. Okay, but these are difficult to decide in many cases. And obviously, when you deal with the object, there's a lot of method, and there's a different kind of features. So there's a lot of feature detectors that are available, which can be used. Whether these feature detectors will be applicable and usable for your own application, that you really have to test. So this is like the good old days when we try to buy a PC. You watch, you read a lot of evaluation, which one is the best, and so forth. But in the end, it's your own application running your program that really matters. So features, there's a lot of fancy features. There's a lot of names. There's no shortage of 3-letter or 4-letter acronyms in the feature that you can always say a few of them to just impress your friend. However, doesn't mean that all these features are really applicable to a specific video, and you really have to try it out before you know that this actually works. For example, that there are this appearance model, there is this edge model, and also at the bottom is a demonstration of the SIFT features. They are just taken from the internet. You can easily search and find many of those descriptions. And as you can see that I'm trying to go through a lot of terminology because this is actually a sort of a broader review part before we get into some of the details. And object tracking, what is object tracking? Well, theoretically, object tracking consists of 2 parts, and which can be fit into a statistical, sequential, Bayesian estimation framework. Essentially, tracking means what? First, you predict where that your object will be, and the second, you use your observation to update it. So the prediction essentially gives you sort of a prior information before you actually see the current frame. You predict based on the previous observation, and also some other physical model. You try to predict where the object should be. And then you look at the current frame, and using that prediction result as a prior, so you actually look harder as where the location you predict it will be, and then look less diligently for there which is unlikely to be. And this is the basic idea of the Bayesian estimation, or sometimes we call the posterior probability estimation. Okay. And of course, when the theory is quite simple, and the conventional algorithm like a Kalman filter is based on this principle, there is actually a lot of challenges, especially in the video, in the visual information. The prediction algorithm, this kind of a theory, was developed when the observation usually is somewhere from radar and others. They're just dots. There's basically a particular cell, a dot. Whereas in the image, the object is essentially a distributed area, region, and therefore try to infer that their position and the update are not as easy. And so, and also the motion that the physical observation, the physical model may need to be adjusted depending on the sampling rate. The video sampling rate, usually we take about 1/30th of a second, or sometimes 1/15th or 1/10th of a second. And the actual motion speed, if it's human motion, usually could be rather slow. And so a lot of times you can just assume that between the 2 frames, the motion is really just a straight line motion. So sometimes that model will work very well. But there are other situations where the motion has a special trajectory and making the particular terms. And in those places, that straight line motion model may not make sense. And in those situations, that we may have to adjust the motion model so that our prediction will be better. And of course, the observations, the past observation may not be correct. So there's a lot of noise, and we have to deal with it. And the current observation as well. When you have a multiple object, and we also have the issue of association, or sometimes called the data association problem, which is very difficult to handle theoretically, unless we have a very clear distinct features for different objects, then we will be able to resolve these issues. And the other subject in this tracking is that template matching. That is, when you got the current friend, how do you know where your object is? And the way to do that is under the framework, sometimes we call the maximum likelihood estimation. We're given a particular query template, and we want to find the best match in the current friend. For example, in this example, on the left, you see a template of I guess it's a hand. And on the right is the entire friend, and you try to find where this hand is located within the friend. Okay? And so we want to find a way of best match. And the matrix used to gauge what is better, and therefore best match, what is a good match, will be very important. How do you define this template matching? What's important is that not within the template that you need to make sure it does match, but also you hope that there's the outside, there's a clear boundary between the foreground and background, and therefore you know what is the template. And so the matching algorithm has a matching criteria, has many of them. Some of them are very more robust, some of them are not, and you really have to try it out. And the background is another issue. A lot of a demonstration of template matching is that have a uniform background. So when you read the paper, you find, oh, this is a great method. But when you try to apply to the real world situation where the background usually are complex, moving, and then the method will fail very quickly. So that, how do you try to eliminate the background before you do template matching could be very helpful. A third thing is the changing template, because human moves. And when we look at a human, when we look at particular part of the human body, those do not remain the same throughout the video. They change. Although they change relatively slow, but they do change. And so if we stick to the same template forever, which does not necessarily always be the best template to use, and how their algorithm therefore has to be adapted to the changing template. But again, this is an important issue that when you start making changes, if you made a wrong decision, that the change did not occur, but you thought it would occur because you're looking at the wrong place, then you actually could be making bigger mistake and eventually reach to complete failure. So how did you adapt to the change without forgetting the some of the ground truth? That's still a very difficult problem. And this kind of problem occurs in many places wherever you want to adapt, for example, for particular persons. In the speech processing, there's a speaker adaptation, which has the similar issues that you tune to one particular person's way of speaking. Then if you switch to another person, then the algorithm will fail miserably. And finally, but not the least, is this activity recognition. How do you recognize activity? That is really difficult, as I just mentioned, because activity related to temporal measurement. It has, for example, in repetitive motion, it has a frequency period, and then you have a motion trajectory. How do you describe your motion? For example, that on the lower left, that you can try to find some key point on the subject and try to track those particular trajectory friend by friend and see how these trajectories. So instead of seeing a whole piece of a blob that moves, you actually see a few points that moves. This is, for example, that in some of the performance that artists put some of the shining stars on their body, and then they do the dancing while they turn off most of the light, only show up, for example, particular type of light. And then you can see that instead of the whole body, you see some of the particular points are moving. And this is one way of description. On the upper right, you see that there is a tennis court. And this, I believe, has been, there's a lot of people study this kind of monitoring, because in a tennis court that easy, the background is very smooth, and then you only have two players. Occasionally the ball boys, ball girls will move around, but otherwise you only see two persons. And however, how do you describe their activity? You can do play-by-play descriptions. You can do summary descriptions. You can do a particular instantaneous descriptions. One of the earlier descriptions I've seen is, I think, at Bell Lab. That's about almost 15, 20 years ago. They have these systems. They actually licensed to the U.S. Tennis. What is the association that broadcast the U.S. Open? I forgot the names, but anyway, I guess so, USTA. What they do is that they were able to use camera to capture track the players' positions, because this is a gridded, so they can easily infer to the player position. And I asked, why you bother, to do this? Well, every of this U.S. Open or games, you also have a commentator. And the commentator like to gather statistics, such as the histogram of the players at the different positions in the court over, say, one set. And then they can use the statistic to show that for this set, the players are also always at the back, or the players spend a lot of times near the net, and maybe that infer to they have a different strategy, and maybe that is due to some of those things. So they're using those kind of statistics to help visualize the player's strategy, and therefore that's one of those. One of those occasions you can use that to analyze activity. And obviously that, today that for most of the football game, one of them is probably coming on Thursday. Is that Hawks versus, which team is that? 49er, that's right, yeah. And then you can see that a lot of times they want to see the individual movement. For example, using 3 fingers to catch a ball, right? And those are some of the activities you want to catch up. But there are other situations that you have a more mundane activity, and sometimes it could be very difficult. For example, you look at those black and white picture on the right. It's just one friend. And then you look at it, you probably see, oh, OK, if that's a person, maybe as a person bending down and pick up something and come up again. But if you do not look at the details, then you won't know what's happening. Or in the lower right, you can see a few people standing there. But how do we know they are talking? Right? You can see that they're standing, there seems to conversing, but how do we infer from just have a few people standing there, and then you can infer they may be talking? And there are people standing on the middle. That's why it's in a queue. And if you go to the particular case, then how do you know what they're doing? You may have to decide they're facing to face, or they are just one follow the other. But how that relates to the in particular situation, that probably will be inferred from other background and where they are and other information to help you. So activity recognition is very much context dependent, and the same thing, same activity record probably infer different things. And so for activity recognition, there's a different kind of classification. So this is according to a tutorial by Agravo, Rule, and Catani several years back. They're saying that there's different approaches. One approach is to view the whole video as as a data, and directly they try to map from each frame of video and they try to figure out what the activity is. And they really know that activity does not only occur in one frame and then change completely in another frame. Usually, we human beings, our response does not change within 1/30th of a second easily, other than perhaps a blink. And therefore, they treat the whole sequence of video as one event and try to classify entire event. So it's like they sometimes call it 4D, because each of the time that you have something happens, and then you go through the entire 3D volume. So they call it video volume, as you can see from the right. And then they try to figure out how to describe this video volume. If they do not take into the time into consideration, they will just simply try to extract certain feature and using machine learning techniques. If they treat this as a time progressed, then you can also try to model the trajectory using dynamic time warping or the hidden Markov model and to model them. So they call this single layer approach. And then, of course, that activity may imply a lot of things. And therefore, just recognizing one single activity, one shot, may not characterize entire activity. And so activity can be layer-wise, becomes a sequence of event. This actually happens in the description of dance. I actually talked to a faculty member in the dance program. I asked him, how does your student remembers those complicated movements of dance? He said, we do not really describe the dance as move your arms 45 degrees, move your left legs 30 degrees in the front, and raise it to 20 centimeters. They cannot describe that. Even after they describe it, they can only do one pose, not entire dance movement. So they have some of the basic routines they have practiced already. And when they try to describe the dance, they actually describe in terms of the sequence of the routine and timed that against the music tempo. So wherever they say that move up from, I don't know, maybe some of you actually watched the TV reality show about dance. I couldn't remember the name of it. That's how they actually do the practice. They do the practice of a sequence of routine, or should we say sub-event. You practice those routines so well that whenever you call the name, your body reacts to it. And then you have a sequence of it that actually creates a dance movement. As they say, even they have a paragraph, and then they can do the section of music with this kind of event. So this is how the human, in terms of dance, organize their movement. And this kind of multi-layer activity recognition try to capture this kind of organization, to recognize that for the short time, there may be some of the movement that will be easier to capture. Then you just treat this as individual, I don't know, it's a syllable or it's like a phrase, and then you can construct entire word, entire paragraph out of this individual elements. So this is why the semantics can be used in recognizing sequence of activities. And this actually have stimulated researchers using rule-based method trying to characterize different sequence. How do you characterize the sequence of movement and try to recognize what this movement really means? And then in this representation, the number at the end, I believe it's a probability assessment. And this is not really probability. I guess it's a manually assessed possibility, or it's just it's a measure that allows one to assess that the likelihood of one thing would happen. And then you use this kind of inference to see which elements are there and to allow you to figure out what are actual activities being described. So these are all current research. There's a lot of possibility there. But for application like what we're interested in, some of them may be useful, but many of those will not be really relevant. And that is what I'm going to present in the next two subjects. Before we move ahead, I'd like to bring an issue about this privacy. The video analytic on human activities, I would say, often infringe privacy. And so there should be a delicate balance between the benefit and the risk. This is just like any other scientific studies, that there is always potential benefit, potential risk. How do we weigh the benefit and the risk? Well, a lot of times influence how we pursue this line of researches. Okay, and also the technology has to keep pace with the societal norm and the law and the policy, so we know that this is allowable and the others are not allowable. For example, you probably have heard recently that the drone, that it's such a nice toy, everybody likes to have it. The issue is that whether the drone, you should allow the drone fly over your backyard. And then I learned that the U.S. has actually laws since early 1900s that says within certain height, I don't know, it's 100 feet or 30 meters somewhere, that below that height actually is part of the property. And anything flying over has to above certain height. And whether that's still a law that will be usable today, we don't know. But technology and this policy and law certainly has to move with respect to time. And they're actually that human activity monitoring also bringing into another area which we have looked into and hasn't really done much, but I would like to introduce to you. It's called anonymity. Anonymity means that you can be presenting with some data, but you will not be singled out. So people cannot, based on whatever observed reporting, to figure out that who is this particular individual. Yesterday I was at the Seattle Science Center. There is a person, I think the tallest person in the world, like 8 feet, right? I don't know if you've seen that in the Science Center, the entrance. There's this billboard. People like to stand by the side, take pictures. Not selfie, because selfie cannot get into the other person. Then if that person, if you try to get, is sitting here, we try to get statistics about the height of the audience. If we just simply divide, every inches, we have a group, so we get a histogram of the height of audience. You say, okay, histogram, probability distribution, no problem. But then you found that there's an outlier, somebody, or only one person with 8 feet. And usually you can check, the record that in the United States or even the world, there's only one person that is 8 feet. So you don't need to know the person's name, but infer from the statistics, you can see, this is that person. If somehow you also release the other information about this, for example, this kind of people with this height will live in the certain part of the campus, then you can infer directly from that statistics to that particular poor guy's address or other private information you may be found. And this is where this the study of the privacy and this anonymity is concerned. So there's this issue about privacy. What is privacy? Can we compute privacy? So far, there's two groups, two definitions. One is by a researcher at the Microsoft Research. It's provide the idea of differential privacy. That basically said that whatever data you released, you should perturb it in such a way that individuals cannot be discovered. Okay, and the second one is called anonymity. It's by a researcher currently at Harvard, Sweeney, I guess. Making it basically say that whatever you release, you want to make sure that each category, for example, histogram or statistics, will be such that you won't be able to tell, from a particular distinguish a particular example from K. K is the sort of a confusion factor. If you can do that, then you sort of achieve this K anonymity privacy. And the other issue we like to say is that privacy must be balanced between privacy and utility. The best way of privacy is that you take out all the camera. Okay? So, if you basically, it's like you blurred all the faces. And that's the best privacy. You probably know that YouTube in 2012 has released a tool in the upload facility where you click it. So if you have a video, you upload to the YouTube, you click that button, then all the faces in the video will be blurred. How many of you know that? You can try it even right now. Okay, you can do that. I actually have several students working with me as undergraduate research, and they are playing with that and try to beat that algorithms. It's a fun algorithm. It's not, and the reason is they want to protect the identity of the protesters in the 2012. I think it's Arabic Spring movement, right? So in response to that, they actually released that tool. So it's in there. Originally, it's in there. I think there's a specific channels for this particular application, but it's actually now available for everywhere. So wherever you upload video, if you don't like the face, you can blur them. Okay? If you only wanted to, for example, the campus, you want a nice picture of the campus, you want to blur all the students' face on it, you can do it. Try it. Okay? And we have some preliminary results to actually looking into a separate approach. Instead of blurring the face, we like to replace, to modify the face, so your face becomes an average face. For those who read the novels, like the spy novel, you know the best spy is the one with the average face, that you just like everybody walking on the road, and nobody can remember any specific signature of the facial, right? And so our idea is similar. Can we get a person or group of person that we modify the facial feature a little bit so that face cannot be distinguished, at least from the algorithm facial recognition algorithm point of view, from K other people. So in other words, that if we make a little bit change of the facial expression, or facial not expression, the facial features, so that one face cannot be distinguished from other face, but we still know it's real person. It's more like a person's face. Of course, there's a lot of philosophical question why we want to do that. Why would we just cover the face with a mask, right? That all the robber knows that all you need is a ski mask, and then you take care of everything. You hide the identity. Why you want to do this? Well, there's a lot of different approaches. What we have done is that we use adaptive appearance model and try to institute the empirical decomposition of the identity subspace, and show that on the right that we were able to change the originally distinguishable face into almost like every one of the same faces out of K equals to, I believe, 6 here. But this is still ongoing research, because obviously we can do that even today using things like the Photoshop. But how do we keep the authenticity of the face or the facial expression? That is another issue we have not completely resolved. because you can always change the face and then nobody will believe you, because you can always add a person, remove a person using Photoshop. So why do you believe the authenticity, or at least the truthness of the underlying information? And that will impact on the what? On the authenticity. For example, you have a protesting video, but everybody's face got covered. And then how do you know that video was taken at the scene, or is just taken from the, from the files, right? So how did you try to show that this is true while they cannot see what it is? That's still something need to be resolved. So how did you keep this anonymity as well as the usefulness of the video? That's something we're not quite sure. However, fortunately for our applications, one of them is easier. The other is more difficult. For the hand activity, the easier part is that most people do not think that a hand image is a part of the privacy. So we can do that. But for the driver state, it's more difficult. So for the remaining 10 minutes, perhaps, that I will very quickly go over some of these projects and show you what we have been doing. So there are two projects we are currently working on. One is a hand activity level assessment. This relates to industrial ergonomics and also the workplace safety, that you do not want a lot of factory work hurt their health. And the second one is a highway driving safety project. The first one is that try to figure out that during the work, especially repetitive works, we don't want to have industrial injuries, and because that hurts the health and the productivities. The current method trying to measure this kind of activity is to tie up the worker, or some of them, choose them, and then with a lot of instrumentations. However, once you put an instrumentation on someone, you ask the question whether that their movement is natural, or because they are more conscientious, so they do something else. And therefore, there is a need and desire to use video, which is a non-intrusive method to assess their activities. And for example, if you want to use a more detailed method, we will put some of the sensors on the tester's arm, and using equipment like this OptoTrack to track the 3D trajectories of those points, and therefore infer the movement. But this is considered intrusive and cannot be duplicated to larger scales. And what we like to do is that to take video, and then we try to assess that whether this type of work is what is the level of activities, or is that within the safety, or it's actually beyond the scale. So there is some sort of scale has been set up by industrial experts. And our job here for the video analytics is trying to monitor the hand movement, and try to output is one of those scales. And hopefully we can do it automatically, and the result will be consistent with the expert's evaluation result. And for example, in this one, this is one example that the type of videos we have been working with. This is actually one of the easier video, that because it's quite clear. You can see where the hand is, and we try to follow this hand. We have to choose whether you follow the right hand or the left hand. In this case, we're going to follow the right hand. However, you see this kind of operations is that there are several different phases. It's not just one single operation. And therefore, when we do the track assessment, how did you estimate the speed, the frequency? These are a lot of ambiguities. We have no idea what we're trying to do, okay? And so there's a lot of challenges, as we have seen that. There's a varying hand motion. There are varying work environment. The motion could be very fast. The camera sometimes can move. And the video recording is really, really, really bad. Because the video we've been working on is obtained about 10 years ago in the factory. And in those days, we do not have HD camera readily available. And the factory, usually the lighting is not very good. It's not really in the studio. So we have to live with many of those conditions. And so the challenge is not just to do this human activity monitoring, but also do it in the very challenging environment. And a large part of research is trying to make these things work. A lot of algorithms work in the regular video, and when you apply to this kind of video, it just doesn't work. Okay. So what we do is that we develop a system, and then we try to improve it phase by phase. When we do this, we basically assume there is a region of interest, sort of draw a box, which is the hand, and then we do motion-based foreground, background separations, and then we do the template matching. And the template matching proved to be the most challenging part. We use both the color histogram as well as intensity-based template. And then we have to figure out when to do adaptation and the update. There's a part I did not say here. It's actually showing that in this block diagram, we call it decision, which is a nice term for what we really want to say is regret. In other words, we make a lot of mistakes. And what we have been doing here is that our algorithm is allowed to regret. Every time it made a decision, we have a check. It's like you have a factory, you made a product. Then you have someone inspectors which will inspect the product. So every tracking decision made, we have an inspector, or we call it decision module, will look at some of the particular features and then decide whether this decision is a good decision or is a bad decision. If it's a good decision, we use it, we're happy. If it's a bad decision, we'll throw the decision away and try to revert to a fallback plan B positions. It turns out this is actually the life savior. Without this plan B approaches, our algorithm a lot of times does not run through the first few frames and it fails. So this is something that is usually people do not say when they have a very good high quality video. When you deal with this kind of low quality video, the oops, sometimes we want to call the oops module, it becomes very important. So these are some of the equations. I will go through it very fast. It's just something you can find from the textbook. And this is some of the formula. It's try to impress you that we do have some mathematics into it. It's just a basic sequential basic estimation formula. This is something interesting. The motion is a repetitive, and so you see that it could be some sort of like a sinusoid. And you can see that what happened is really at the turning point, the prediction becomes very difficult. It's, of course, because when you try to turn, that your linear type of approach will not work very well. So we developed a simple polynomial-based approach to allow us to use more of a different type of physical model to model the motion. And it turns out that, and using least square to see that the motion trajectory, which is shown as the blue dots there, it turns out that this becomes very useful. And there's some of the additional things, how to use the motion detections, how to do the search. The basic idea is that you have a lot of a similarity metric, and we use two different metric to two different features. You may ask why, so I asked the graduate student why you want to use different metrics. And his answer is, well, I cannot argue with that. His answer says, it works. Okay. So which metric you should use depends really on which works. It has no theory behind whether you use this metric or not. That also means that there's a lot of testing and trying and error. So this is a pure empirical part. You have to try a lot. If it works, you use it, and you just give that as an excuse. It works. There's a search module. Again, there's a lot of different choice we can do, and this is another different criteria used, a correlation, and the reason is because it works. Okay. This is the regret module I mentioned. that whenever we have this matching result made, we will check for the matching score, and we also check for some of additional information, how they align with the predicted result and others. And what's really important is that if the result is deemed invalid, it's below some threshold, and how do we decide this module? How do we decide with this threshold? I have to tell you that it's by trial and error. This module is heuristic decided and by a lot of observations, and the threshold is cross-validate with a lot of testing data, and we figure out this is the best threshold we should use to give us the best performance. But this module turns out to be very important, because whenever we make decision, we say this is the best result under the situation. But the best result may not be good enough to pass another absolute threshold. It's like, in the relative result is like you have a curved exam, right? However, that perhaps professor would say, aha, that after we do the curve, before we do that, you still need to have, say, 80 points, 80% of the grade in order to get an A. And then this validation module is for these purposes. Not just basically that relatively out of all the choices, this is the best you can have. But also we require this best choices will be good enough to really pass the score. And it turns out this is very important, because a lot of times our matching, because of very noisy, very bad videos, that without this, we won't be able to get things done. And we have done some simulations before we actually use in the factory. We actually create some of the sample factory within the lab and take these pictures, take the video, and with the ground truth, because this allowed us to really fine-tune our algorithm. And the experimental result in here basically showed that compared with earlier baseline result, that you can see that it's much better. The proposed algorithm is better. The right-hand most is the later algorithm. The left-hand side is the algorithm we have tried different versions. The blue one is what's in the laboratory. The red one is what we have in the factory. And as expected, because in the laboratory that the resolution and the lighting are much better, and therefore we can get a better result. The factory, our result is limited. And I have to admit the factories are the result which we actually see that we are able to quantify it, because there are some factory work involve so many sections that we just cannot, even human being cannot be able to define what is the activity level as specified. And these are some of the more detailed, and the whole idea is to show that some of the tasks are easy. When you see all these colored bars are identical, those are the easier tasks. There are some tasks which are difficult, because this horizontal is different video. And some videos, no matter what you do, like the real 2, no matter what you do, you don't pass 30% level. It's hard, really, really hard. Okay? And some of them are really easy. And this is one of the tracking examples, showing to you that on this, there's a circle, not circle, I'm sorry, a red square on the hand. That's our region of interest. And then, during the time that we have developed this front end, so you can see that there's a ball will come out, and we actually build this platform. And the task is to move the ball, and we try to track that. And underneath it, we'll estimate this absolute, let me see, this is speed, and therefore we can actually calculate the frequency and other issues over here. And the screen actually gives us sort of reference time, so that in case we have a synchronization issues, this will allow us to have a multiple camera to synchronize. This is actually applied to a real factory video. And you can see that on the bottom, we real-time estimate those speed, displacement, and others. And the square, the square is how we do our tracking. and the camera moves, and sometimes that we, oops, the camera moves too fast, and we lose the track. So these are some of the applications we're using. And we're using this, we also allow the student workers to manually annotate the result. Because when we do the video tracking, we like to know how good that we are doing the tracking. So the algorithm does not give us 100%. And therefore, it turns out that annotating to get the ground truth becomes the most manual intensive part of the other project. The student will have to do frame-by-frame manual tracking for about 2,000 frames before they can actually join the project. I use that as a sort of the threshold, or should we say the ticket. You have to do the hard work before you can join the research group, do the research. So far, I only got 4 students to complete their duties to join the research. That if we can do the annotation automatically or semi-automatically, certainly that will make this life easier. So part of the story about this video analytic is that who's going to tell you this is the correct result? You can write a lot of algorithm, but how well the result is, that really is an issue. We have no ideas. Okay, and this one, so this is the first part, and the second part is a short one. Where it's still ongoing, and our goal is to quantify the driver descriptions, and this is talking about. Probably you have heard that there's a lot of study of whether you drive and texting. How many of you ever text while driving? You don't have to raise your hand. I don't want to ask. This is self-incrimination. I don't do that. Okay. But this is related to those kind of study that while you're driving, that if you're distracted, how much time that you will be distracted by what kind of activity, and how that will affect your safety, driving safety. So this is a study administered by the Federal Highway Administration. The Virginia Tech was the original contractors that they have recorded for about 3 years about tens of thousand hours of videos, and now they want to analyze it. So we sort of joined the project, trying to help them to analyze so many hours of video. Okay, so that's basically what they're doing. And the videos, so basically what happened is that they put a lot of sensors on the vehicle, and they recruit volunteers. So there are almost 4,000 drivers in 6 states, and they also accrued about 2.5 million trip files. Some of them 20 minutes, 30 minutes, some of them hour long. So there's this many hours of video need to be processed. And somehow they have combined this video cameras into this format. As you can see, there's a front camera, there's a rear camera, there's a driver camera, and then there is a camera on the lower left, which will watch the hand of the driver. So this is the kind of video we're working. The total frame size is 640 by 320. So the other part are really low resolution, and you can see the lighting could change a lot. So this is basically what we have. This is one of the typical driver's face, and then you can see that resolution is rather low. So this is the situation we are. And we like to use the driver's face pose, eyes, mouth, and other things to infer the driver's state. Is this a driver attentive, or is this driver really distracted? And also we know if the driver actually have an accident. If that happened, we want to correlate them. Okay. And of course, the drivers are not instructed to create accident. Okay. They just drive normally. That's what they're planned. So this is one of the video, and we're using the standard Viola-Jones face detector as a baseline. And so this is one example. You can see that this works. Sometimes good, but then, oops, you lost it, right? Because it's not frontal face. So you see that for most of the time, we don't really get the face. And we don't get and especially those parts when they're turning the head. That's why we want to say, this guy is turning the head. But turning head is not necessarily a bad thing, because we look carefully, this turning the head probably is he's trying to what? Back up the car. Right? Back up the car, you want to look over the shoulder. This is why you take the driving test you should do. But on the other hand, is this guy really talking to someone in the back seat? We don't know. So activity, it's hard to infer. We have some of those. And so this is an improved one that we use some simple statistic method. When you see the white box is the one we're using tracking to say that if the face template is very similar to the previous friend, we think that it's still the same head of the driver. So let's try it. Even the facial detection software does not yield anything, then we can still track it. And we're still doing other things with this, try to infer then. The next thing we do is trying to figure out what is the facial feature, so we can see whether the driver is driving closed eye or open the eyes. We can see that whether the driver is chewing gums or talking or just moving the mouse. So we need to figure out where is the eyes, where are the mouths. And this is some of the video we have. I believe that we were able to track those video features as of now. But sometimes you can see that when the driver is doing something differently, then we have problems. Our job is trying to make this more reliable. And we can also have algorithms that from our colleagues there to determine how to use the exemplar-based approaches to figure out the facial part. So there's different steps trying to figure out the various different parts of the facial. And eventually, we were able to parse this entire facial features. And the issue is that using this approach, it takes currently about 3 minutes per friend. And we have several million friends, hours of videos to process. So it's several billion friends. And we counted that our whole campus computer won't be able to use this algorithm to process the video in time to finish the project within our lifetime. So we decided that we need a new algorithm. So although we have this, but we haven't really, our research is being how to make it faster. And of course, this video has a lot of challenges. We have, these are small faces. We have this blur faces. We have night and night light. We have reflections and others. And our task is trying to work out through all these kind of a difficult one. So for example, these are the good faces. We can do a very good job. These are the bad example for some reason that we just simply cannot handle the profile face very well. And then these will be even worse. Whenever you see the color part, that's the segmented face. And when you see that there's only a small yellow spot, that means that we fail miserably. So far, we have a lot of difficulties. And so this will basically conclude my presentations. We have summarized the human activity monitorings. And we have discussed some of the examples. We have a lot of people to acknowledge for. And finally, thank you very much.
Any quick question from the audience? Any quick question? Yes, please.
What kind of measures or strategies are you using to optimize the 3-minute per frame analysis?
OK, so you're asking the 2 minutes per frame question, right? What strategy we're trying to use? Our strategy is to look into our algorithm, see which part, it's just like when you optimize your program, which part takes most of the time. And we ask the question that, do we have to do this for every friend? See, the algorithm was developed for individual image. It's not for video. And for video, there's a lot of friends that looks very similar. Can we use the first friend we made a decision, we already have a result. Can we use that as a good initial condition and therefore bypass a lot of intermediate steps and therefore reduce the time? That's our approach. Because most of these kind of algorithms developed are for individual frames. Even for the face detection algorithm, it's for the frames. And we're applying that for every frame. Does it really worth it? That's the key ideas that we are looking into. Even for the tracking, is the same idea. If we know the head is there already, within 1/30 of a second, our human head cannot jump to the other side of the frame, right? So it should be there. And it just matters in the sense that it turns a little bit more. So we check for some of the features. If they are OK, then we say, OK, this, whatever that is, it's a driver's head. And we adopt this as a new feature, a new template, and then we keep the tracking. So that's our basic approach. Yes?
Do you look at compressing the frames themselves, or are you using the previous?
We are using the question is that do we use the compressed frame? In this kind of these analysis, currently we're doing the offline, and therefore we are using the raw decompressed video. We're not in the process of doing any compressed domain processing yet. Okay.
All right. So let's give Professor Hu another big hand. If you have more questions, please stop by here. Thank you.
Thank you.